important announcement. Before we get started, I would like to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples. I wish to further acknowledge that Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the treaties, the spirit and the intent of the treaties and treaty making, and remain committed in working in partnership with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, collaboration, and reconciliation. Good morning, I'm Rochelle Squires, the Minister of Families and the Minister responsible for the status of women. And I'm joined by my Cabinet colleague, Justice Minister Calvin Goertzen, as well as Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smythe, and Commanding Officer Rob Hill from the RCMP, as well as Heidi Spence, Director of the Missing Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Liaison Unit. Marcus Chambers as well, the police, the board chair, as well as City Councillor. Last week was Stop Child Sexual Exploitation Awareness Week and Human Trafficking Awareness Week. Today, I'm pleased to be here to support this important announcement. The Department of Families has already implemented the recommendations from Manitoba's Advocate for Children and Youth in the special report, A Place Where It Feels Like Home, the story of Tina Fontaine, to create a protocol requiring response plans for missing youth in care, especially those who are at risk of exploitation or harm. Today's announcement further advances our government's response to the Advocate's recommendation on increasing capacity for a joint child welfare and justice response. There are many different organizations represented here this morning because this is a multifaceted, integrated response to an ongoing and historic challenge in Winnipeg. And so now I'd like to invite my colleague, Minister of Justice Calvin Goertzen, to share the details of this morning's announcement.
Thank you, Minister Squires, my great colleague in the Manitoba Legislature. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with you, with representatives from the Brandon Police Service, from the RCMP, from the Winnipeg Police Service, from MKO, and Bear Clan as well. Councillor Chambers, thank you for being here this morning. Just as a beginning note, I want to acknowledge the loss of two officers in Edmonton a few days ago, and I know that the Edmonton Police Service is dealing with a tremendous loss, as are the residents of Alberta more generally, and of course the families of the two fallen officers. It was just last week that we were here for an announcement, and we acknowledged that the work that law enforcement do is dangerous. We don't always see the day-to-day danger because we see the end result of their work, but we were reminded again last week, tragically, of the difficult work that they do. And so to those in uniform here today, please pass along our thanks to your members for that work each and every day. Last year alone, there was 9,315 missing person incidents reported in Winnipeg alone. That doesn't even include the rest of Manitoba. As a Justice Minister, as a Manitoban, I see frequently the news releases, the messages on social media, the reports in the media regarding missing adults and missing children. And each one of these is an individual. Each one of these represents a family who is worried about that individual who is missing. That's 25 missing persons each and every day. That's more than one an hour. And all too often, these missing individuals are Indigenous women and girls. Many end up living on the street for a variety of different reasons. Many are young people in the CFS system. Others are runaways, often from Northern First Nations communities. And they remain on the street and vulnerable to violence, to exploitation, and to abuse, as Minister Squires has indicated. Manitoba has seen, sadly, consistently high rates of missing persons over the past number of years, especially among young girls. In 2021, 63% of missing children were runaway girls. It is entirely unacceptable, and we must do more to intervene to protect children and families and to ensure the safety of young people. Shortly after I became Minister of Justice over a year ago, I had a meeting with Chief Danny Smythe, and this was one of the very first things that the Chief raised with me, and the need to have more resources in place when it comes to missing children, missing individuals, missing adults. The RCMP have indicated that this is a concern, and of course, the different agencies and First Nations and Indigenous communities. So I am happy today to announce that the Manitoba government is investing $2.1 million in dedicated police resources to a Manitoba integrated missing persons response. This initiative aligns directly with some of the recommendations of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, such as the need for better supported community-based first response of missing women and girls, and the need for more responsive, transparent, and accountable initiatives. This investment will require the coordination of police agencies, CFS, support services, and community services providers to assist in identifying and managing chronic missing persons in a responsive, coordinated, and data-based way. The composition of the team will require some further consultation with stakeholders, many of whom are in this room. However, the work of the team must be collaborative response from our local, regional, and provincial partners to be successful and have the full impact. The goal of this response unit is to provide additional support to those going chronically missing and prioritize the investigations and suspicious missing persons. We need to ensure that this integrated effort uses the resources in the best, most responsive, and most effective way. Investing in this integrated unit prioritizes the well-being of Manitobans who are harmed by violence through dedicated integrated resources to investigate and address the issues such as child abuse and exploitation, human trafficking, and chronic missing persons. I want to again thank the law enforcement individuals who are involved in this integrated approach. We've talked about the importance of integrated policing over the last couple of years and seen specific investments into integrated efforts. We know that law enforcement, regardless of the jurisdiction that they're responsible for policing, have to work together, share information, be coordinated, be speaking to each other. And it's through the leadership of the law enforcement that we have here today that I think that is happening in a better way than it's happened for a long time. And I'm very, very appreciative of their leadership because it takes their leadership for it to happen. But most importantly, and in conclusion, each one of those missing person reports that we see on our local news, on social media, out in different ways, is an individual who is at jeopardy. It's an individual whose family is worrying about them, and it is an individual who ultimately is at risk. Today is a good day as we make steps to try to address this issue in the province and try to reduce the number of individuals, particularly young girls and women who go missing. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Minister Gertson. This new integrated missing persons response unit will be a welcome addition to protecting kids and young people in CFS care, as well as others who are chronically missing. It is an unfortunate reality that Indigenous women and girls are reported missing from northern and rural communities. Many women and girls travel or are lured to or trafficked to the city or other urban centers where they become at higher risk of experiencing violence and being exploited. Establishing the Manitoba Integrated Missing Persons Response Unit will reduce the number of missing adults and children, provide supports, and meet many of the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into the Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls. This initiative aligns directly with several of the calls for justice from the National Inquiry, such as the need for better supported community-based first response to missing women and girls, and the need for more responsive, transparent, and accountable policing. Data continues to show that women experience violence at a significantly higher rate than any other demographic group. More than 70% of domestic homicide victims are women, a disturbing statistic that underlines that much more needs to be done. This past November, I provided Manitoba's endorsement for the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. This action plan is the first in Canada and sets a national framework to end gender-based violence so that women, girls, and 2S people can live free of fear and thrive. The National Action Plan recognizes the importance of access to responsive services no matter where you live, the importance of culturally informed and community-led services, and that systems need to be redesigned to enable this work to succeed. Manitoba's framework addressing gender-based violence was released in December of 2020. The first biannual progress report will be released in the near future that will inform our path forward here in Manitoba towards ending gender-based violence. Our government recognizes that we must lead this work, respecting the core principles of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, entitled Nothing About Us Without Us. In December, I was pleased to announce 2 further projects that demonstrate this understanding, and our Manitoba designed initiatives that address gender-based violence and implementing the calls for justice. The Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Implementation Plan project is a community-led initiative and guided by an Indigenous matriarchal governing body. This project puts the knowledge and experience of community at the forefront in developing solutions. Also, the Engaging Men and Boys project focuses on the prevention of violence against women and girls and supports men who have exploited women with an aim at breaking the cycle of violence. This project shifts the focus to addressing demand and work with men and boys to understand the root motivations behind exploitation, trafficking of Indigenous women and girls, and develop solutions to address and stop these behaviors. These initiatives are promising, but alone are not enough to end gender-based violence. We must continue to dedicate ourselves to eliminating violence in Manitoba and across Canada. I would now like to invite Chief of Police Danny Smythe to the podium.
Thank you, and good morning. When it comes to missing persons, we recognized a long time ago that there were 2 areas where people can really be vulnerable to harm. One of them is when people are transitioning to Winnipeg, often from remote communities or rural communities, and they're coming down to Winnipeg for anything from medical treatment to education to just recreation. But they're not used to the dangers and the harms that can come with the city, and they become vulnerable. The other area that we see a focus on is we have quite a number of children that are in care, and often they're housed in group homes here in the city and have the tendency to take off from those group homes. Those 2 areas create a lot of vulnerability and potential harm for these people, and it takes a lot of police resources to try to address that and track that down. So it's important for us with this announcement to have consistent missing person reporting. I was happy a few years ago that we started to dedicate a missing persons coordinator to do the intake of files coming into Winnipeg. This is an opportunity for us to expand that province-wide. And this is important because it will address those 2 areas of concern. By having that coordinated response, it allows us to do a quick risk assessment on incoming files. It allows us to share information quickly between our partners, whether that be services like Brandon and Westman or the RCMP who have jurisdiction outside of Winnipeg. It allows us to quickly assess that and assign resources so that we can start timely investigations, and we can also look for opportunity to more effectively liaison with the families. We have some good relationships with organizations like MKO and others in the city where we regularly liaison with them so that they can provide information about loved ones that have been reported missing. So I see this as a win-win for all of us here. It provides consistency in reporting and the ability to tap into each other through risk assessment and response. So I'm very pleased to be here today and stand in support of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Smythe, and thanks to you, your members, and all your law enforcement partners for everything you do in helping protect vulnerable children and returning them to a place of safety. Now I'd like to invite Commanding Officer Rob Hill to say a few words on behalf of the RCMP.
Good morning. Thank you, Minister Squires, Minister Gertson, Councillor Chambers, Chief Smythe, Chief Balkin, and Heidi Spence, who's the director of the MKO MMIWG Girls Liaison Unit, Miigwech. Across the province, RCMP officers are receiving reports of missing persons on a daily basis. On average, the Manitoba RCMP receives 10 missing person reports per day. That's over 3,500 missing reports per year, a staggering number. Many of these reports involve youth who live in smaller cities or remote communities. In fact, 53% of all missing persons reports in 2022 originated in our northern detachments. It is not uncommon for these missing youths to be drawn or lured to larger city centers like Winnipeg or Brandon. Once in these larger centers, they can become vulnerable to exploitation and or victimized by people who have no care for their well-being. This is why the Manitoba Integrated Missing Persons Response Unit is so important. While there's already a great working relationship between all police services within the province, this new unit will allow for dedicated staff and true coordination of missing person files throughout Manitoba. What I'm truly pleased to see is that this coordination and information exchange will not be limited to police services, but will also include key partners such as Child and Family Services and Indigenous advocacy groups. Without a doubt, this new integrated effort will greatly enhance police response to missing persons and help us achieve our ultimate goal, ensuring that missing persons in Manitoba are found quickly and safely. Thank you to our policing partners and to the province of Manitoba and MKO for making this integrated unit a new reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Officer. And the risk is real and the problem is great, but together we can get better results. And it takes law enforcement, government, and community to make it happen. And so now I'm really excited to introduce one of our partners in this initiative from MKO, Heidi Spence, to speak on behalf of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Liaison Unit.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come up and speak today. So, as it was mentioned earlier, we at the unit, from a community level, we often hear and support families of loved ones who go missing from, our communities in the north and in the south, and sometimes, we have information that they may be in a large urban setting like Winnipeg. So I'm really pleased to hear about this new initiative because it's going to help with the resources and better communication to be able to give answers to the families and the loved ones of our women, girls, and to us LGBTQ people that are missing in the province. And it will also, help, again, it'll help on a community level and, on a provincial level as well. I'm really happy to hear about this initiative. I on behalf of MKO, you know, I look forward to working with everyone, and you know, being able to sit down with everyone and you know, see how we can better work with each other and be able to share information quickly to families, so you know, we can try to help them, you know, with, you know, when their loved one goes missing. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for everything that you do and for the collaboration. So that concludes the formal portion of this program, and I know all of our speakers are going to be available to take any media inquiries. Thank you for coming out today.